I'm here with Jennifer Stern, a licensed independent social worker focused on grief, loss, and difficult life transitions. And if you want to check her out, her website is Transformative Grief. So at this moment in time, people have not just experienced COVID and all of the limiting factors of that, but also real loss, like loss of life, death of loved ones. So as parents of teenagers, how do we help them?
Well, I think we help them by providing space for them to grieve as they need, recognizing that how you might grieve is different than how they might grieve, and what is comforting to you may not be comforting to them. So normalizing the grief experience and practicing reflective listening. Instead of saying, oh, you must be so fill in the blank, say, tell me how you're feeling. Let me know, is there anything that I can do for you or with you? What would be supportive? What would be comforting? What do you need me to know?
And what happens in those situations where that child has shut down? Like you're doing that reflective listening, but they're not giving.
And by them not giving, they're actually showing you what they need, which might be time and space to process on their own. Teens do a lot of processing in their room with the door closed, texting, Snapchatting, looking at their phone, listening to music, and that's okay. You know, you have to be where they are. You're not going to be able to force disclosure of feelings or emotions, but what you can do is putting a note under their door, texting them, just quick notes. I love you, thinking about you, I'm here if you want to talk, or if you want to play basketball, or do yoga, or go for a walk, or bake cookies. Speak their language that you have already known them to go to during difficult times.
So I think for me as a parent, the thing I always want to know is, at the end of the day, it's not like I want a glimpse in your brain and your emotions, because I want to know that you're okay. Mm-hmm. That's the worry. Like, if they're up in their room and they're really isolating themselves, like, how do I know that they're okay?
Well, first of all, no one knows their child as you do, right? So for me to say, oh, don't worry, they're okay, that might make you feel better in this moment. But the truth is, when they're behind closed doors, you're still going to have that worry. The most important thing is authentic and transparent conversation, where you say, I want to respect that right now you might need to be alone in your room, but I also worry and I love you and I need to know that you're okay. So is there a time when it would be all right for us to watch a show or go for a walk or make dinner together? Whatever the activities were that joined you prior to the death, kind of look to those now.
And in this situation right now, it's been so hard for people because they might not have been able to see their loved one as they were dying. Is there something that after the fact is important to do to kind of put some closure on that? Like, you didn't have a chance to say goodbye.
Ritual and tradition is very important, even in the time of COVID. And what that can look like, and especially with teenagers who are so tech savvy, most of them, is saying, why don't we create a memorial page on Facebook and ask family and friends to share pictures and memories? Why don't we send an email to family and friends and ask them to share pictures and memories? Engage them in the process of positive remembrance. Allow them to kind of lead the way. What would it look like? What would be a great way for us as a family to still have some form of ritual here? Is there music? Is there a prayer? Is there a poem? What is it that reminds you of the person that passed away?
So create that memorial service that you otherwise might have had during another moment when we could all be together.
And there's also the opportunity to plan a very meaningful celebration of life on the anniversary of the death a year later, to really make that meaningful and engage the inner circle of family and friends.
And for the time being, if the death was sudden, there are still people dying of non-COVID related things that, we anticipated. Is there a difference if it's sudden?
Well, what happens when it's sudden is there's this shock that is so disorienting. There's no time to prepare. There's no expectation of, well, there was a terminal illness or they had advanced fill in the blank. So really the suddenness of a death can make it so hard to believe, to wrap your mind around. And especially if you don't get to have a traditional funeral, or you don't get to go to the hospital or the funeral home to say goodbye, it can make it very um, difficult to accept. And so you have to do, depending on your teen, a lot of conversation around what would you have liked to have said? Would you like to write a note to have buried with grandma or grandpa? Is there a memory that you would like to share with family and friends? Do you have questions that either I can answer or the funeral home can answer? Are there things that you need to know to be able to kind of integrate this truth that they've died so suddenly?
Like your tone of voice and your words are, they like, I could feel them opening me up, like just listening to you. And that's great when we're together, when we're the parent who's coming to the kid to offer some support. But what if we're the grieving parent? How do we do that?
Well, most of the time, there's this duality, right? Because if your kids are grieving, you're grieving because your kids are hurting and they're sad. And so it's very important to be authentic and true with your feelings. This is a really hard time. I am feeling really sad. Sometimes I want to be with people, and sometimes I want to be by myself. Nothing is making me feel better right now. I wish I could have said how much I loved so and so, so it's kind of putting out there your truth, and also normalizing and validating that this may also be your truth. I do think it's important always for yourself and for your child to know that no two people grieve the same. It's very important to understand that. And everybody's relationship was different with the person who died. So their grief will be as well. There's intuitive grief, which is the expression of emotion. And there's instrumental grief, which is more task focused and kind of, let's get back to business as usual. And both are healthy and both are okay.
So sometimes we forget that we're sad, and we have a moment of normal, what was normal prior to the death, and that can feel really confusing. So how do we help our kids through those moments? Where do we say you're allowed to laugh, you're allowed to have moments with your friends that are joyful?
Well, that's super important. It's very important to recognize duality, that it is possible to feel deep pain and also joy and an excitement to be with certain people or have certain experiences. That this duality is with us forevermore, that those experiences might feel bittersweet, happy and sad. And that's okay. That's a part of life. We all at some point feel both happy and sad, excited and lonely, connected and isolated. And that duality is very much a part of grief and a part of healing and a part of living forward with grief, which is, I'm excited to go to this party and hang out with my friends. Oh, but maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should feel sad. And it's really saying there are no shoulds in grief. It's honoring yourself and knowing that the person who died loved you and wished for you to be happy and healthy and take care of yourself. And sitting in a room crying and avoiding friends, that's okay if there's moments where you need to do that, but it doesn't mean that's how you grieve the person that you're missing.
One last question. What do you want the parent who lost their parent and is supporting their child through the grief at the same time to understand?
To be authentic and transparent, to ask for what you need, because then you're showing that it's okay to give yourself permission to be alone or to be together, to look at pictures or to not, to find ways to remember positively or to distract yourself in positive ways, exercise, work, television, whatever that might look like for each individual. and to know that sometimes there are no words, and just being present, sitting beside, hugging, laying in bed beside, that sometimes not saying anything is the best way to connect in grief.
Jennifer Stern, thanks so much.
Thank you.